We have 2 minutes.
A little bit less.
Almost there. 3. Let them actually hit play at 8. It's 8 o'clock. 3, 2, 1. Hi, everybody. My name is Shane Schulz. I'm the creator and host of Arisen Strength. I want to welcome you to our show here, our weekly podcast we have every Sunday night at 8 p.m. I know that some things have been a little bit strange on the different sites and so forth lately, but I'm really happy that everyone gave us some feedback and was able to watch the show as we're showing it live tonight. So let's start off. We've got a short cast today. We've got a bug going around the world, it seems, that has to do with Arisen Strength. So, but I'm here. As I said, my name is Shane Schulz, and I've got my producer, my best friend Wayne.
Hello.
His name is Wayne the Hacker because he is the master producer of Arisen Strength, as well as some other things that I do with Serenely Speaking. So, Wayne, I want to say that you've been under the weather for quite a while.
Yeah.
The flu's been going around. Our buddy Dan Fitz seems to have caught the bug, and we believe that Crystal is probably sleeping it off right now too. So, we're going to have a short staff, but that's okay when it came to this particular show because, as I said last week, we're going to treat this month of May a little bit different than what we normally would do, mainly because it is the awareness month for mental health for May, and that happens to be a forte of mine. It's what I actually speak on in different venues such as hospitals, outpatient clinics, around here locally in New York, as well as online at other places as well. So it kind of fits in my wheelhouse. So I'm all right with being on my lonesome here, other than my producer. So we're going to get right to it. But I want to ask Wayne, how you feeling today?
I'm doing much better, Shane. Hopefully I won't be coughing too much during the show. It was been a rough week. I won't kid about that. But I'm really excited about this month of shows. And tonight we're really getting in hard with depression. We're not going to take it easy and go in slow. We're going to jump right in with depression. I would like to just put it out there just so that there's no confusion with people listening. We're not clinicians. We're not trained mental health experts.
Right.
if what we say sounds like we're giving clinical advice, that's going to be on us, I guess, because we don't want to make it sound that way. By all means, if you need to see a professional, see a professional. If you're seeing a professional, take their medical advice. But we can talk about it from our perspective and from our experience being involved
with other clinicians and doctors.
You know, we don't just have a couple of weeks experience.
Right.
We've been through some pretty intensive treatment. You know, so with some hospitalizations, let's get it out there. We've done some time inside. We've done intensive daycare. You know, a lot of experience dealing with mental health professionals for treating. Among other things, depression. So if it sounds like we're using technical jargon, that's just probably years of experience and just years of exposure, and it's just that's the language we use sometimes. But by no means are we clinicians. We're not going to give anybody any medical advice. We're just going to talk about our experiences and what we've seen, and really kind of our feelings, and really invite you to give us some feedback and share with us.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you mentioned that, because as I've said from the very beginning of this show, you know, when it started in January of 2014 or 15, like Wayne said, this show is not to replace any therapy, any doctor's advice. It's not to be a replacement. In fact, this show, as well as my purpose in life, is to help the person while the professional is treating the patient. You know, so we're, as Wayne said, we're probably going to have some verbiage or vocabulary that's going to sound like it's real technical and so forth. The reason why that is because that's the way that we would communicate with all the professionals that we've dealt with in the past. And that's the only way that we were able to do that in order to be on the same page, to be able to get our needs met. But it's in no way, shape, or form is it to talk over anybody. And in fact, we do the best that we can in order to make it very simplified from a patient's point of view, to be able to get that point across. So you know, that's very important, and I'm glad that you brought that up. So, you know, tonight we're going to talk about a subject that is often not discussed, and in fact, it's literally avoided by far too many households, even today. Really, folks, I can't tell you how important this is. This is a subject where a large majority of this world will go out of their way to avoid sharing with anyone. Believe it or not, that goes for our closest family members and even our most trusted friends. You see, it has a habit of making us feel very uncomfortable and vulnerable. And for some, it'll leave us with a heavy, intrusive feeling whenever we find ourselves anywhere near it. So tonight, we're going to talk about depression. Now, I'll tell you one thing that makes me shake my head like nothing else. And that is, for a subject that's talked so little about, it seems that just about everyone has not only experienced depression, but they also have the perfect words that's needed in order to be able to try to pull you out of it when you find yourself there. You know, but when that happens, we've all had situations as to where we've had either passings of loved ones or friends, or you know, we lose our job, or we have relationships that don't work out, or whatever, or we get blindsided, you know, as to where we're really not expecting what's going on, and so, you know, so when we find that, you know, we're definitely are warranted to feel depressed, and that is very common. But for tonight's purposes, we're going to talk about depression as clinical depression, or otherwise known as major depression. Now, I know there's a lot of people out there that believe that depression is depression. And, you know, it's not that I'm trying to make this a big argument here. The fact is that they are two totally separate things. One is an emotion, And like I said, we've all had that emotion of depression at some point in time of our life. In fact, I personally think to just add the word major or clinical in front of a word that describes an emotion that we've all experienced doesn't begin to describe the full extent of this illness at all. Oh, wait a minute. Did you catch it? That's right, I said illness. You see, we're not talking about just an emotion anymore. Unfortunately, we're talking about something that's much more than that. And hopefully by the end of this show, and also by the end of the month, you'll have a little bit better understanding with what it is that we're trying to get across when it comes to this particular subject. Wayne, you know that what depression is as far as the clinical base. It's definitely a different thing than what it is as far as an emotion.
Yeah, and the word they use is situational depression. People will talk about that, and yeah, that happens to all of us. Things that are going in your life, but it's like a temporary thing. It's like the ebb and flow of life. There's days when you're happy, days when you're sad. Events happen to you, and they're not completely separate from clinical depression, because clinical depression can be triggered by situational depression. That's true, but they are much different things, because the clinical depression has that feeling of it wears on you, because there's almost like no explanation for it. It's like a lot of times you beat yourself up because you're thinking, things are going well for me. I shouldn't be thinking like this, or what's wrong with me, or there's that I can't get out of bed. And even when there's things that you used to be excited about, things that you used to be happy about, things that used to bring you a lot of joy in your life, that just don't do it for you anymore. And nothing seems to motivate you. And there's just like, it's like the life comes out of you, which is a different feeling than that situational depression.
Sure.
And it can be. When they start getting together, whoo.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I totally agree. Like I say, let's just start off with it. We have the definition for clinical depression. But before we do it, I want to take a minute, just to ask a favor, of everybody, and that is to try to be open-minded to what it is that we're talking about. And what I call it, when I go out and I speak on behalf of the patient, from a patient's point of view, I call it, suspension of disbelief. And what suspension of disbelief simply does is it doesn't say that you don't have an opinion. It just asks you for that minute or that point in time to just put aside your opinion for a minute, be open-minded in hearing what it is that is being said, and then you can have your opinion afterwards without any issue or backlash, because you're well within your rights to do so. But really, clinical depression is depression of severity to where it warrants the attention of a physician and or a psychiatrist, and generally deals with medications. But there's a little bit more to it than that. That's what, very rarely does somebody come right off the top with what the definition of depression really is, because it's very complex. And most of the time, it's talked about through what's called the DSM-5. And I can tell you what that is, but it really doesn't matter. But it's a book that has all the definitions of all the diagnoses for mental illness. And so, to make a long story short here, the reason why there's this book is strictly for insurance purposes, because they need to know what's going to be covered by the insurance, in order to pay for the services that are rendered. That's why they came up with clinical depression. Now, clinical depression is a lot more complicated than what people think. We're not just talking about that it just makes you depressed. There's actually a criteria as to where there's 9 different components of clinical depression, and in order to be diagnosed with clinical depression, you have to have at least 5 of these components within that 9. The first one is obviously a depressed mood or irritable. Now, what that means is, it doesn't mean that you just don't feel well or whatever the case may be. What that means is most of the day. nearly every day, as indicated, and it also means nearly every day over a 2-week period. That's the actual break. Now, if you want my personal opinion, and I'm not afraid to say this at all, I think 2 weeks is a little bit ridiculous when it comes to that's the criteria. My personal opinion is it needs to be at least 2 months. When you have somebody who is constantly, in a depressed mood, irritable, and subjective to sadness and emptiness and so forth, to where tears appear or whatever. Over a 2-week period, there are things that happen that's out there that can be very, very understandable. Number 2 is a decreased interest of pleasure in most activities for most of each day. Now, what that means is things that you normally would do. Now, Wayne had mentioned that there were some things that he used to like to do, and I know I used to like to do, but when we were in a depressed state of mind, we didn't want anything to do with them, and we just didn't find the fun in it anymore. We just didn't find the enjoyment in it anymore. So that's number 2. Number 3, significant weight change. Whether it be a change in appetite or whether it be illness or whatever the case may be, to where there's a change in weight, whether it be up or down. That's another component. Number 4, change in sleep. This is a very big one in the criteria. Change in sleep, whether it be insomnia or hypersomnia. And what that is to say is that it's very common for somebody who has clinical depression is to where they either sleep all the time or they don't sleep hardly at all. I personally only get about 4 hours sleep, on a daily basis. But when I'm in a depressed state of mind, I would sit there and I would want to sleep all day long. I didn't want to move, and I just that's when you really knew that there was something that was going on to where it was taking over. Number 5, change in activity. What that means is psychomotor or agitation or retardation of your mindset, is to where the change in activity, all of a sudden you're breaking the pattern of what you normally would do, whether it be your work schedule, whether it be, I used to play golf every weekend. If I decided that I was going to play golf, for a month or so, or whatever the case may be, that's a change in activity. Or maybe to go along with the change in weight loss or weight gain, it could be a change in your activity as well. Number 6 is fatigue or loss of energy. Now, when we say fatigue, we don't just mean tired, we mean exhausted, where it just seems as if like every muscle in your body is aching over your bones, and you just have no energy to be able to do anything. Loss of energy. You don't want to even get up out of bed. You don't want to take a shower. Your daily routine of brushing your teeth or washing your hair or whatever your case may be is an activity that now is one that just is too overwhelming to be able to even get out of bed to try to do. Number 7, guilt and worthlessness. Now, guilt and worthlessness is one that really hits me. I personally have a lot of problems when it comes to guilt and worthlessness. This means excessive and inappropriate guilt. For instance, if I was taken advantage of sexually when I was in a homeless shelter, I have a way of assessing guilt on myself for that happening, because my decisions had me end up in a homeless shelter, and so my distorted mind would say, well, if you weren't in the homeless shelter, you wouldn't have been taken advantage of. That is a distorted thought, and it's a guilt process that is very demoralizing and can be detrimental. Number 8 is concentration. Diminished ability to think or concentrate or are indecisive compared to what you normally are. You end up being like a waterlogged sponge. You know what I mean? It's just your mind's heavy, your body's not working right, and you just kind of spacey in a way, to where things just aren't, you're not reacting like you normally would. And number 9 is suicidality, thoughts of death or suicide, and has a plan. Has a plan is a critical component of that. It's not just about suicidal thoughts. In order for it to actually be considered as a component for clinical depression, you have to have a plan. So, as I said, this is the criteria, and as you can see, it's kind of complicated, and it has these 9 components. And if you have 5 of these components, then you could very well be clinically depressed. And that's the difference with, and again, you can see that list versus what we feel when we're emotionally depressed. They are 2 totally separate lines of thought and actions when we are sitting there being clinically depressed as opposed to being emotionally depressed. Wayne, you want to chime in on the list here?
Oh, they all sound familiar. Yeah. I might go for about 8 of those. I think I've been lucky. I don't know if lucky might be the right word, as far as the suicidal thoughts and the planning. That part I've never experienced, but without a doubt, the other 8. Sure. I mean, there's been long periods of time where, and it's so exhausting, because until you can actually get in, if those of you out there who are struggling and are not getting treatment and never gotten treatment before, I actually started getting relief just when I started getting treatment. Just the thought of getting treatment was more like this, that's right, maybe it's not me, maybe there is something else, or maybe now there's a glimmer of hope. I mean, it wasn't a cure just to seek out treatment, but there was for the first time in a long time, some like hope. And that's one thing that is kind of gets lost in this depression, is there's this, it's like learned helplessness and learned hopelessness, and it's just, everything is duller, and when you actually are able to get that first couple steps to doing something different, sometimes that's enough to keep the next step going, and it can maybe build the momentum, but take strong supports. And it's not, I don't blame a person, I don't judge a person who doesn't seek the help on their own right away or for a long time, because I've been there. I went through a period of time, a year and a half, I didn't go outside. I did not leave my apartment for a year and a half. So, when I hear people talking about this, trust me, I understand this.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, when it came to clinical depression, see, the thing is I don't know, I was a little bit different, where I had no idea. And there are so many people out there that don't realize that they have an illness, and it's not just that they're thinking negative, and it's not just that they're tired all the time. It's not that they're lazy or whatever the case may be. And I grew up in a privileged home for the most part, compared to a lot of people. I had 2 loving parents who wanted to do whatever it took in order to make me safe and make me, a contributing person, and a loving person. And, I had a lot of advantages that some people just didn't get to have. I mean, I knew that, but at the same time, I had no idea that I was dealing with clinical depression. In fact, it's like, as I had my first opportunity to speak, I fully intended on utilizing my voice to help others like myself bring awareness to the subject of mental illness in venues, in like hospitals and clinical centers and different support groups and so forth. However, when I had my first opportunity and it presented itself further, I came to realize, I might have been putting the proverbial cart, so to speak, before the horse. You see, I knew that my intentions were real and they were sincere. That's I never had a PowerPoint presentation. I never had any props of any kind or anything like that. Instead, it was just myself spending some time together with some folks out there on a common ground subject. Still, I had a big problem. Who am I? I had to somehow find a way to show my street cred, so to speak. But how was I going to do that? How was I going to be able to reveal what it is that people like myself go through on a daily basis and yet still be significant enough to be heard from by others? How indeed? I remember where before my first opportunity, I said, well, maybe there's a book I can read, or maybe there's a seminar I can go to, or maybe I can watch a YouTube video so that I can learn all the important points that I need to be able to express so that I can make it more understanding and more entertaining, I guess, for my audience. I said, but I had no, I didn't know how to do that. Until one day somebody came to me and they said, Shane, just tell them your story. Your story. Well, do you realize that even to this day, sometimes I really have a hard time finding my story compelling to anybody else? Sure, I've had some challenges in life, some struggles, but tell me who hasn't? Just because I've experienced over 30 years of addiction, severe chronic depression, a borderline personality disorder, and PTSD, or post-traumatic stress disorder, folks, that doesn't mean that there's a whole lot to talk about that's going to keep anyone's interest. Well, aren't the eyes of denial so very good at what they do? Tonight I'm being facetious, but in truth, this is the exact way I used to think and feel before my eyes were open not that long ago. Wayne, can you relate to that?
Oh yeah. There were it was like, I guess when I kind of alluded to before, it was finally getting out and starting to get that help. You start realizing a lot of stuff, the way I was thinking, what things I was doing, and it wasn't, for me, it turned out that it wasn't just the depression itself. I ended up ultimately being and probably rightfully diagnosed with bipolar. There was some depression that I got diagnosed with, and some anxiety, and I got treated for that. But I also had serious problem with drinking, and so I had to get past that. And until I started addressing sort of all these things, and really getting serious, and then realizing, wow, the way I was doing things made zero sense. Now looking back, it makes zero sense. But in the middle of it, it seemed like it was all making sense, and it wasn't just an overnight thing where everything changed, but it was overnight in the sense of taking that first step, from taking no steps to taking that first step. And once you take that first step and you start doing it one day at a time, we talk about this in recovery, one day at a time, it does add up, and over time it starts making a difference. And then sometimes you look back, or I look back and I go, wow, I can't believe, now for me, for right now, I have 1,507 days sober. Excellent. So that's just adding up one day at a time. How do you do it? Well, I did the same way. Really the same way I stayed in my apartment for a year and a half. As an experiment, don't do this, anybody, but don't go outside for a day. 24 hours, spend 24 hours in your apartment, and see if you survive it. And then if you do, then do that every day. You'd be surprised what you can do if you do it every day. Whether it's stay inside your apartment every day for a year and a half, or like me, 1,507 days sober. You can do things once you get it going, and then it gets its own little bit of momentum, and then you start realizing, hey, I'm thinking about things differently than I used to, and that's really the goal here, is just to get that perspective change, embrace the supports that are being offered, really take ownership of your condition. Don't deny it. Stop saying I'm not depressed, or this is not me. You have to do that sort of radical acceptance, is a word we'll use in treatment. This is me right now. This doesn't have to be the me forever, but I have to accept what I have right now, and what I am right now, and what my situation is right now, if I want to get out of it. I cannot get out of it until I accept that.
Yeah, and that's absolutely true. and remembering some of my pictures of my childhood, I had blonde, wavy hair, blue eyes, and a smile that was as wide as can be, with nothing but fun and mischief attached to it. But little did I know that this young blonde-haired boy, was going to become a member of the club the minute I was born into this world. You see, I learned much later on that both my biological parents had addiction and mental illness in their gene makeup. Now, I mention this because my biological father, well, he exited my life at a very young age. But thankfully, I was adopted by a man who I call my father. His name is Ken, because he raised me from the very beginning. Now, like I said before, I'm going to be totally honest with you. I had a lot of advantages that some don't ever get to have. I had two loving parents. I never wanted any, I always had a roof over my head. I always had food on the table. Christmases were pretty damn good, they just were. I was even had the privilege of going to a high school that was number 6 in the country in academics. These, because of the sacrifices that were made for me, and if you put all this list on paper, well, there'd be very little reason why you would think that I would have any problem whatsoever being successful in life, and not only being successful, but being very, very successful and flourishing in anything that I wanted to do, because I had that privilege. Well, that's one side of my story. Unfortunately, there are two sides of my story in this sense. I also developed a fine way of self-loathing of myself. I always hated my name, whether it be my name, my looks, my voice, whatever the case may be. One or all of them were always being judged by my inner judgment down deep within me, and it was very damaging and detrimental. So much so that it would make me feel as if like there was a void that was within me, something that was sick, and something that wasn't what it was meant to be. It even got to the point as to where I'm not proud to say it, but I started writing death threat notices to myself. That's how much I was in pain. I wanted to kill myself, and sometimes I would actually leave these letters for my parents to find. And it wasn't so much to get attention, I guess, but it was. But at the same time, when they found these letters, whether they believed it or not, you're going to feel a certain way. There's definitely something going on. And so it got to the point it's where my parents got concerned enough as to where they started sending me to different doctors. And back then, going to a psychiatrist was like Ernest Hemingway. They had their office in their house. They had a big library and everything, and I walk in and the guy would, well, tell me how you feel. What is it that you feel all the time? Everything's feel. And I sat there and I would tell him what it is that I was thinking and feeling. And and at the end of each time, I would leave there, and the doctor would be with my parents, and they would say, "Look, Shane's just a boy being a boy. It's nothing more than that. He'll grow out of it. It'll all work out." Well, as time went on, I got worse. I didn't get better. I got worse. My parents would get more concerned, and they would send me to another doctor, and another doctor would sit there, and I would have this way of being to where they just didn't see what it is that I was feeling inside. So much so that my parents, became very, very frustrated with this because they knew that something was wrong, but they weren't being validated in that. So much so that they actually, gave me a nickname that stuck with me like glue for the rest of my life, and that was Master Manipulator, because they thought that I was just simply saying what it is that they wanted to hear. When in fact I was just answering the questions that they were asking. They just didn't ask the questions that I would be able to answer to be able to give them the way that I was feeling on the inside. So it was creating a divide within my family. And I started having distorted thoughts. I started thinking, well, my parents don't like me very much, and they're just trying to, make me feel a certain way and trying to be tough love and everything. When in fact, the reality of the situation is they were scared to death, realizing that here's their son, of which they don't understand at all why it is that I was feeling the way that I was feeling, why it is that I was acting the way that I was acting, and why it is that nobody could tell them, what was going on. Wayne, did you have something similar in your life?
Yeah, I guess I'm not real clear how I want to phrase that at the moment. So,
Okay.
But certainly there was a lot of distorted thinking in my life, and looking back, there was on some level thinking like, I had everything. There was no reason anything should have gone wrong. I mean, I had all the opportunities I needed. I did all the things I was supposed to do. But there was definitely something going on that was periodically getting in the way. And for me, it turned out my bipolar was flaring up every couple of years, which would put me through a ringer. Like it was very, very difficult to even explain it to somebody who really has not experienced that mental illness. I mean, all these mental illnesses, they present in different ways, but with the bipolar, sometimes it's just everything about your world changes suddenly, or very quickly, especially to other people. But it all makes sense to me at the time when it's happening. So I would do things like complete career changes, or quitting school, or just things that are, that you might do once, or that's what we might do once in a lifetime. But for mine, it was more like a pattern, and it was it became very self-sabotage in a way.
Right.
It was like, and it'd be like right when things are going great, and then it would crash, and it would be then it would be low for a while, and then things would start picking up, and all of a sudden I'd be riding really high and doing really great at a job, or really great at school, or really great in the situation I was in, and then it would crash. Yeah. and then the only recovery really was to do something completely different. And it's bipolar is one of these ones. Depression is a big part of it. 20% of people diagnosed bipolar 1 end up committing suicide. This is the most deadly of the mental illnesses. So it really messes with your mind, and the depression it causes with the mania, just unbelievably distorted sense of what's going on, and that's why you have to really trust the people that you're around, who your supports. You really need some supports, and I think it just goes over to all the mental. People with all depression, especially, you got to have supports that you do trust, because if you rely on yourself and you're suffering from major depression, you're never going to get out of the hole that you're in.
Right. Yeah, I mean, my void within me just became bigger and bigger, and it became darker, and it was certainly much more lonely. I mean, if you can imagine having places like nowhere and anywhere and still not be able to fit in, that's what it felt like. I mean, here I was on the outside, a young maturing man with the potential in the world, but on the inside, I was full of pain and emptiness that was gradually making me feel like I was decaying inside. I knew there wasn't much more that I could take, and especially the way that things were going. So finally, I came to my breaking point, and I decided that who I was on the inside was not who I wanted to be. So I made a bold decision, and I created an identity of my very own. And it was one that was very strong, and more importantly, it was less vulnerable. One that was fearless and opinionated. In theory, it was going to be the identity that I always wanted, even though it was anything that was a natural fit for me. And so, still, I made a change in my life official by developing my own core beliefs. Now, what are core beliefs? Well, we all have core beliefs, And what that basically is it's your own values. It's the values that you learn, while growing up, whether, from your parents. Generally, they're handed down from your parents, your grandparents, these values that make your opinions stronger and meaningful. I had my own core values from my family, but as I made this identity, I created my own values. I created my own beliefs, and I attached them to what was already passed down to me. Now, here are some things that I would say, and that was, do the right thing, even if it means to sacrifice yourself, or always put yourself in front of opportunity. And then one of my favorites was always do more than just the average that you see. Now, at first, these values are anything but dangerous, but just like anything else, if lived to the extreme, only misery and pain can follow. And, and that's what would happen to me. Now, here I was trying to save my soul from a pain-filled death, and yet it was these type of black and white values, or dare I say rules, that I created myself, along with my illness and my world of addiction, that would lead me to a life of anguish that just seemed to never end. And oh, by the way, I don't know if you caught it, but I had a world of addiction. And Wayne talks about how he used to have the extreme ups and the devastating downs, and how he would change things, on just a spur of a moment, or self-sabotage. Well, that's what my world of addiction was. In fact, I'm going to write a book called 16 States of Addiction, because I actually lived in 16 states, and my addiction went with me in each one that I went to. And I'll be honest with you, I could talk about my addiction every day, for probably 2 months, and we probably still won't get to the beginning and the end. So in the essence of time, we're not going to take the time on it with this night when we're talking about depression.
I just want to say, just to give you an idea of how complicated and how involved these addictions can be, is, as Shay said, he could talk every day on it for 2 months, and he won't be talking about his addiction with alcohol, because that wasn't his addiction. He won't be talking about his heroin addiction, his cocaine addiction, his addiction to marijuana. It's not a drug or alcohol addiction that he's going to be talking about, but yet people could talk 2 months about alcohol. They could talk too much about drugs. You could talk every day about addiction for a year, and you're just scratching the surface. And I think that's just really kind of mind-blowing when you think about it.
And to be added to what it is that I was already talking about. You know what I mean? It was like one of those things, is where here it is. I'm an open wound. I'm vulnerable to no end, and I'm just looking to feel like I fit in, to be validated. And so, and anybody who knows anything about addiction knows how welcoming addiction can be towards somebody like myself in that state of mind. So I definitely will talk about my addiction this month, but I'm gonna go past it, for tonight. So needless to say, my world of addiction was very long, and it was tumultuous, and it was tormenting. I was with all the components of, jails, institutions, and death. I was arrested numerous times. I only ended up with one charge against me. The institutions, I've been in 8 hospital stays, 8 different hospital stays. I've been in institutions where they shut the door and they don't let you out. I remember, Mother's Day is coming up, and I remember being in a hospital, and I was looking outside the window, and it was Mother's Day. It was a gorgeous day outside, but I wasn't able to go out, because I was in an institution where they were trying to work on me. And then when it came to death, I tempted death on a daily basis, often. It was one that was very common to me, because I just absolutely did not want to live the way that I was living, and it didn't seem like anything that I changed made a difference, because the depression always stayed with me, and it had its own character. So anyways, that and I know that I paint a pretty doom and gloom picture here. I know I do, but I definitely had some great opportunities and experiences in my young life. For instance, I was part of a stock car family for over 13 years. We were lucky to win 8 track championships and all the excitement that went along with it. At age 14, I achieved my first hole-in-one in golf, and it was on a par 4, which, by the way, Tiger Woods does not have a hole-in-one on a par 4 yet. So, I feel pretty good on that one. I was, fortunate to have won numerous golf tournaments, both individually and in team competition. My high school was number 1. Some great experiences in life when it came to baseball. I was on championship baseball teams. In fact, on one of them, I actually made the last out of the season by catching the last out, and I can just tell you that that's something that I'll never forget. So I've had a lot of opportunities, and a lot of those opportunities were due to the fact of the sacrifices that my family would make for me. I've even jumped out of a fully functioning airplane. Now, normally I tell a story when I'm out speaking in different venues and stuff. But we don't have enough time in order to go through the whole thing. But when I jumped out of a fully functioning airplane, and it was a little bit of a scenario in the beginning. Maybe we'll go over that at some point in time throughout this month. But the idea is that I was very excited to go. It was one of those things that I wanted to do in my life. But here it is. I'm getting ready to jump out of this airplane, and I remember as we're training, everything is just ho-hum. It's not a real big deal. And then all of a sudden, I saw this rolling chassis, like a frame of a plane, and it's over by itself. And I look at the instructor and I said, well, "What is that over there?" And he says, "Oh, I'm glad you asked." And I'm like, "Well, leave it to me to ask, because this is certainly going to hurt, I'm sure." This is where we learn that we had to climb out on the wing so that we can jump in the air safely. Now, I don't know about you, but when I've seen people on television jump out of airplanes, I don't see anybody having to climb out on a wing in order to do it. It's like, I hear Geronimo, they jump out, they're gone, But so, anyways, so we train and we do all this and everything. Well, I go up on the plane, and I wanted to be the first guy to jump. So I jump right in line, right? I jump right in line, I'm going to be the first guy. And I got my friends there, and they're all terrified, and I don't, I'm excited. So we get on the plane, I'm first in line. Well, guess what? I'm also the first one in the plane. So guess where everybody's equipment went on? Me, which isn't really good because I'm a little bit claustrophobic. So I'm sitting here. So you're first one in line, you're the last one to jump out. So I had the privilege of watching all my friends' terrified faces as they climb out of the airplane, out onto the wing, and what is sure to be the last time that I'm ever going to see them. So now it comes to be my time. Now, to make a long story, even longer, the instructor and the pilot, I'm thinking they were having fun with me. I'm not altogether sure, but they said, "We need to get this done because we're going to run out of gas." Well, I'm like, "Listen, shut the door and let's land this thing right now." I'm all for landing. And well, we were to the point of of no return, so that wasn't an option. So it was my turn. So I ended up having to go out on the wing, and they said, "Okay, well, there's going to be this foot plate." Well, this is a misunderstanding of all kinds. I mean, this is a misrepresentation of what they say is a foot plate, because it's about 2 by 3 inches of aluminum that's hanging off of the plane. And so I sit there and I'm like, you want me to stand on that? And they're like, yeah, but hold on to the wing. Oh, that's why we got to climb out on the wing, because there's nothing to stand on. So I go out on the wing and I climb out, and then, you know, this is the funny part. You would think, as I'm out on the wing and I'm about ready to die, I'm sitting there, I must be out of my mind, right? I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, am I going to die? Or am I going to, you know, is something going to go wrong? No, that's not what I'm thinking. I'm thinking I'm going to lose my shoe, because my left shoe was a little bit loose compared to my right one. So then I end up looking over at the instructor, and he gives me the thumbs up to let go. So I let go off of the wing, and I'm in the middle of the air and everything, and I pull the chute. And here's the thing. Anybody who's done skydiving before, it's not unusual for there to be a twist inside the chute. You know, generally it's like 1 or 2. It's not a real big deal. You kick your feet a certain way, it unravels. Not a big deal. I pull my chute. My chute isn't just twisted once. It's not just twisted twice. It's twisted 8 times. So here I am looking up, and I'm falling like a rock, and I'm kicking my feet like you would not believe to unravel this thing, right? So I finally get to the point where the chute unravels, and I'm like, huh. Okay. And the instructor comes on, he goes, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm all right. I'm all right. You know, it's not a big deal." And he goes, "Well, you know, just sit back and relax. You know, it's like you really deserved it." And I said, "All right, fine." So I'm there. Now, this is why I'm telling you the story. Because after all of this excitement, after doing this wonderful experience that I've always wanted to do, here it is. I'm up in the air, and I'm having trouble enjoying myself. I'm having trouble feeling what it is that I thought that I should feel while skydiving, something that I'll never be able to replicate in any other way. You know, so I started like I remember trying to force myself to feel it, as to where it's like, hey, you're closest to the sun than you'll ever be, or, you know, feel the wind that's going across your face, or, you know, look at the power lines that are coming closer and closer. You know, it's like, and I was trying to force myself to enjoy it. But really what it was is that I wasn't able to enjoy it. And it was because of my depression, along with my battle with PTSD, that didn't allow me to get to the point as to where I could actually enjoy what it is that I was doing. And I always had this thing as to what's next. What am I going to do next? I've done some amazing things in my life. You know, I've already mentioned a few, and I've done some more. But I've always said, what's next? And you know, to the point as to where I, you know, when I finally do pass, you know, on my gravestone, as I'm an old man, it's going to say, what's next on the gravestone, because that's the way that my life really was. And so I really wasn't able to enjoy things. I was able to, you know, feel things, but I wasn't able to fully take it in. And that was a really tough thing for me. Wayne, I don't know if you had that type of experience?
My experience more where you know, I'll be suffering with depression through long periods, with depression, but there'll be these just brief moments of like sort of like happiness, mm-hmm. where you almost feel guilty about being happy, and especially other people, you know, they start calling you out. I was like, oh, you know, it's all cured now. Look at that, you're smiling today, or you know, you seem to be enjoying yourself finally, and then it kind of reminds you that you're not. Right. You know, it becomes very, very difficult to hold on to moments and let them last. I mean, you know, real happy, joyful moments, they sort of echo and they ring a little bit, and they sustain themselves even after the event completes. And as you're talking about, I mean, there is a sense of like, you know, as soon as it stops, like a light turns off, boom, the happiness is only even penetrating in the moment, and that's at best, because it doesn't sustain itself. There's no echo. There's no ringing or anything like that. It's yeah, powerful stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it was devastating, because you couldn't imagine, doing something that you really liked, you really enjoyed, but or at least you thought you did, or you used to, and then all of a sudden you can't do that anymore. And it was to the point as to where I felt like I was just existing. I felt like it was just not getting to that point where I needed to be, in order to feel like I was wanting to feel, and like everybody else got to feel, when it came to laughing, when it came to enjoying themselves. I always had this resentful look, as to where it's like the average person, can feel that. They can be content and enjoy it, where I had to go to extremes to even get where I could get, just so that I could feel like I was doing more than just existing. And so that's just one example. Now we're coming up on an hour, so you can just imagine that we're not done with the subject. So and I don't want to go too far into it, because we're going to talk about depression again next week, because we're going to do what we do here at Arisen Strength, and that is that we're going to give some education, we're going to give some support, some encouragement and empowerment, as well as celebration. So it's like, but what I wanted to do is I want to leave you with a written piece that I actually had, which talked about my depression, and I wrote it, I think it was like 3 years ago, and it basically it was called "I Want My Money Back," and just give you a little bit of a background. Here it is. I'm in intensive therapy, and so that they want me to write about things, and they want me to, to tell them, what it is that I'm thinking and feeling, and all this. So I decided, well, what I can do is that I can go ahead and I can write about it, and try to get it to the point as to where they can understand. So what I did is I wrote this piece called "I Want My Money Back," and I hope that it leaves some people. It's a little bit of a cliffhanger. I know it's a little bit heavy today, but rest assured, we're going to do what we do, about Arisen Strength the following next Sunday, when we have Crystal here and hopefully Dan to be able to help us out with the other things that we do, such as education and empowerment. But here's the written piece, of which is "I Want My Money Back." It says, "Here you are, looking at the hand that holds the pen, as if it has some sort of control in finding the words from my mind to paper. Meanwhile, my mind's working its very own magic. You see, it's making me disappear, making my value less and less. Imagine my body in a retail display, made to look sellable to some average day consumer. My attire snappy and appealing, wearing a new white Oxford shirt, crisp with starch, and the first two buttons undone so to draw attention to the Italian gold chain around my neck. My lower body's draped with blue jeans, obviously pressed and sustained by a chocolate brown belt with a buckle made of gold. My feet are first covered in a soothing dress sock that is then cloaked with a sand-colored cowboy boot, which relates well to the beige camel skin sport coat that hangs over my shoulders like a tailored fit. I notice a sign to the side of my left pant leg. It's about 6 inches by 4 inches in size. We've all seen these before, where they're used to emphasize the selling points of the displayed merchandise. While reading the sign, we see words such as hardworking, compassionate, humorous, and some other points of emphasis were intelligent, competitive, unlimited potential. So here I am looking at myself in this display, and I say to the salesperson, "Hey, this looks great. There's no need to wrap this up. I intend to just walk out of here and wear it outside myself." Well, the salesperson had no problem writing up the sale and cashing me out. True to my word, I take a moment and I place what was so fondly on display onto my very own frame. At first, I walk around with pride and confidence. Suddenly, however, I feel a definite presence. It's one that feels conflicted, to say the least. Okay, so it's obvious it's not a perfect buy, but still, there are more selling points that I can't wait to experience. Now, wait a minute. What was that vision in my head? Such a strong emotion that was attached to it. Whatever it was, well, there's no sense in worrying over it. After all, I still have more positives than negatives. Besides, I'm almost home now anyways. Hey, wait a minute, what was that? Did anyone hear that scream? My body tenses, my mind races, where I feel I must do something right now. What in the world was that all about? God, just let me get home. I go to look into the sky for a pleasant view, and without any warning, I notice this big billboard that shows this excited couple who are obviously having the time of their lives at some casino. Whoa. Man, I feel weird. I mean, in one way, I feel like I'm in complete control, but then I have this spiking feeling that's abnormal, to say the least. And now it's making me feel this depressing guilt. Oh my God, what is this now? I feel nothing like I want to. It's never-ending dread and this feeling of brokenness. What the hell is this? What does this mean? You know what? Forget it. I just want my money back. Folks, I want to say thank you for coming to the show. I promise you, we've got a second part of this show when it comes to depression. We're going to do what we do best at Arisen Strength. I want to say thank you for coming, and I know how you feel, and I know how you think, and I'm here to help. Good night, everybody.
Good night.